It could, yes.
Then I shall make use of this starship.
It will be your chariot.
Excuse me.
It will carry my power to every corner of creation.
Excuse me, I'd just like to ask a question. What does God need with a starship?
Star Trek V: The Final Frontier was released in June in 1989 in the United States and later that year in October in the UK. Costing $33 million, it was a critical and commercial flop, only taking $63 million on the expected $200 million box office, with most of the blame cited on William Shatner, who was given the opportunity to direct. But is Star Trek V: The Final Frontier really that bad? And is Shatner really to blame for the least successful Star Trek movie? It's definitely in Star Trek folklore that Star Trek franchise suffers from the odd-numbered movies. The first Star Trek picture often labelled the motionless picture for its slow pacing, while Star Trek III was criticised after the fan favourite Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan for not quite hitting the mark. However, Star Trek V definitely has become the most debated movie for its poor production values and poor story, and terrible visual effects. William Shatner came up with the story whilst working on Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home. Due to a clause in his contract, Shatner was either able to take a pay rise or take the chance of the director's chair on the next movie. After the success of the previous two movies which Leonard Nimoy had successfully directed, many felt this may be a vanity project for Shatner, and by this time it's fair to say that the Paramount execs weren't that interested in producing movies starring the original crew, in favour of rebooting the series with a younger cast and looking back at the Starfleet Academy years, as it was felt that the original cast were getting a little long in the tooth and wider at the waistline to continue a profitable franchise. In real terms, the movie had a much smaller budget than the previous movies. Shatner's story about a rogue Vulcan on the search of Shakari, the place of God, had to be expanded, and because of the Writers Guild strike, they had to settle on David Lowery, who had written Dreamscape in 1984 and went on to write Passenger 57, as there weren't many writers available. Many compromises were made to Shatner's original story, and the budget definitely wouldn't stretch to the fantastic final act he had imagined, which would have seen the depths of hell unleashed on the Enterprise crew. Because unlike the previous movies, industrial lights and magic were unavailable to take on the special effects work, a relatively unknown company were tasked with this job, who had little experience of producing effects with miniatures. Bram Farren's company promised to deliver on time and on budget. Their work was definitely less than spectacular, and a huge disappointment to William Shatner, who was forced to take the blame for this. I would argue that producer Harve Bennett should have taken more responsibility here for this. It was well documented by this time that Harve Bennett was less than ecstatic to return to the franchise. After producing the last three most successful movies, he was burnt out and had felt he had been mistreated by Leonard Nimoy. Apparently, it took William Shatner several hours to convince Harve Bennett to return to the project. The already tight budget was pushed when the original bridge sets were damaged, as they had been left outside to rot, and a totally new bridge set was designed and produced by Herman Zimmerman, who'd been working on The Next Generation.
What's the matter, Jim? I miss my old chair.
Herman also designed the new sets for the Klingon Bridge, the observation deck, and the set for Paradise City, based on Nimbus 3, the defunct planet of galactic peace, where the three planetary ambassadors are captured, which include the chronically underused David Warner. No wonder they invited him back for Star Trek VI. I always think Paradise City was linked to Total Recall, released a year later. Not only does Jerry Goldsmith use music cues very similar in Total Recall, but also includes the three-breasted cat creature, not too unsimilar to the character in Total Recall. Shatner had hoped for new uniforms, but simply could not afford them. having to settle for just the less than flattering Starfleet Marine uniforms, which were designed by Nilo Rodis. They look great on the younger extras, but bloody awful on Shatner and the crew. With a very, very tight pre-production schedule, a less than finalised script was put into production, and Paramount were very keen not to go over budget, due to their perceived lack of interest in another Star Trek movie. During production, the ending of the movie had to be changed dramatically. Due to the budget, Shatner had envisaged a great battle involving angels and demons, but was only allowed the budget for one rock monster, which didn't work anyway. So you can see the production didn't go very smoothly, and it's amazing that we got a finalised movie in the first place. For me, the movie plays out like a very traditional series episode, a very expensive one at that, with the opening introducing Spock's brother Cyborg, played by Lawrence Luckinbill, on his quest for Shakari, which is a play on Sean Connery, the actor they had envisaged to play the part of Cyborg. Opening with the great music from Jerry Goldsmith, who returns using the theme from the motion picture, which became the Next Generation theme. There are some of the best character moments of this series here, especially between Kirk, Spock and McCoy, and all the supporting cast get their moment to shine, and I have to say it's the most colourful and one of the most interestingly shot movies in the franchise. Sure, there are issues here with the story, and the final act is a disaster, but in recent years the movie has been viewed very differently by fans. I must admit I didn't get to go and see Star Trek V on its release in 1989. I was around about 17 at the time, and I was put off by the critics, and I also got to the age where Star Trek didn't really interest me anymore. I didn't get to see it until the early 90s on a dodgy VHS that I'd rented from the local video store in the traditional pan and scan, and I've got to say I was less than impressed. I'd love all the previous Star Trek movies. I'd got to see them all on the cinematic release.
Well, don't just stand there. God's a busy man.
So is Star Trek V really that bad? Well, I doubt it's going to sit on any top 10 best movie lists, but I definitely think it's undervalued and certainly faced its challenges. The movie was released in a year of some great competition. Batman, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, Ghostbusters 2 and Back to the Future 2 were all released that year, and I definitely think by the fifth movie there was some sequel fatigue, as many franchises find it difficult to push past the fifth movie. There's lots to enjoy here and some of the best character moments in the franchise, especially with the main trio. Sure, there's no real main antagonist, and the finale is definitely less than satisfying. Even the Klingons have little impact. We're definitely not seeing this movie at its best. 15 minutes was shaved off the final edit at the bequest of the Paramount execs, and William Shatner has apologised several times for the ending and has requested an opportunity to deliver a director's cut. Whilst I definitely think it's short-sighted of Paramount to turn this down, after all, this did work for movies like Blade Runner. Even though this is deemed a failure at the box office, it's true to say many movies rarely lose money. By the time rentals, TV deals, streaming and DVD sales are included, I doubt this movie fared so bad.
You know, you two could drive a man to drink.
Me? What did I do?
What did you do? You really piss me off, Jim. Human life is far too precious to risk on crazy stunts. Maybe it didn't cross that macho mind of yours, but you should have been killed when you fell off that mountain.
It crossed my mind.
And?
And even as I fell, I knew I wouldn't die.
Oh, I thought he was the only one who's immortal.
Oh, no, it isn't that. I knew I wouldn't die because the two of you were with me.
I do not understand.
I've always known I'll die alone.
Well, call Valhalla and have them reserve a room for you.
So is this movie a classic in waiting or a total disaster? Let me know in the comments below, and please consider subscribing to my channel. Once again, thanks for watching, and I'll speak to you guys soon. Thanks a lot.